Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Lanes podcast. Before we get into the podcast, I just want to talk to you about our new sponsor that's come on board, Books and Gifts Direct. Books and Gifts Direct is Australia's largest direct seller of books and gifts. They sell their products from lunchrooms and reception desks and are in more than 25,000 workplaces across Australia. These workplaces include schools, childcare centres, businesses, hospitals, community centres and other corporate entities. Their books and gifts sell up to 70% off recommended retail price. And as the leading direct seller of books and gifts across Australia, they have a strong buying power, and without the overheads of a shopfront, they can afford to pass on significant savings. So if you want to take a look more at this, the website's going to be below in the comments section, or you can go www.booksgiftsdirect.com. Thanks for listening, and let's get into the show. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Lanes podcast. On today's episode, Salt's going to be doing his top 8 predictions of the Eastern Conference, and then he'll include the play-in tournament, who he thinks is going to be in the play-in tournament, but most preferably the top 8 tournament. So without further ado, let's get into this. Welcome to another episode of the Lanes podcast. All right, welcome to another episode, guys. I hope you've been liking the content so far. I've been having some pretty positive reviews on the last podcast I've done. Shout out to Stu Tom, Kieran Fitzgerald, Owen Fitzgerald, Mossy, Chris. Thanks for commenting, sharing, subscribing. Marcus Racine also. It means a lot to the brand and myself, so I'm really appreciative of you guys doing that. But without further ado, top 8 prediction of the East. And before I say anything and get into it further, it's actually a lot more difficult than what I thought it would be. I thought it would be, clear-cut 8 teams, and then you'd have, maybe those 2 play-in teams. But it's actually pretty interesting. Like I think it's like 10 to 11 legit teams that can dead set possibly make the 8. So what I'll do 1 to 8, because I think that the 7, 8, 9, 10 seed is actually a bit more intriguing and interesting than the actual 1, 2, 3, 4 seed, because we kind of know who's going to be good already in the East. So in no particular order, I'll just go straight off the bat. First team, the reigning defending champions, the Milwaukee Bucks. Not a lot needs to be said on the Bucks here. They're definitely going to be in the playoffs. I think that Giannis is going to have another career year. He could possibly be contending for that MVP again. A lot of people don't even realize this, but he's kind of just starting to enter his prime now. Like, you see the best production of players when they're about 27, 28, 29, and he's only 26. So it's going to be really interesting to see how he goes and to see what he's going to be able to produce in the long haul, because I think it's going to be pretty dangerous, But obviously we know that the Milwaukee Bucks will definitely be in the playoffs. My second team, in no particular order, also Brooklyn Nets. We always know that they're going to be in there. Possibly could have been the champions this year if Stu Tom, one of our listeners, he put a good point out. If KD's shoe was behind that line, that 3-point line, we could possibly be talking about them being the champions, So that's actually a really, it's actually a smart take, because he kind of took that Nets team by himself, because as we know, James Harden was injured. He was playing, but he was a shell of himself. And then Kyrie Irving did his ankle, so he was out too. There was no specific, injury there. I think it just must have been a really bad sprain. So he was out for the remainder of that series. But yeah, Brooklyn's a no-brainer. We obviously know how good they're going to be, the offensive potential they're going to be. Later on in the year, probably a bit closer to the start of the season, I'll do my power rankings. And then, as we all know, they'll be at least in the top 5. For me, if nothing changes roster-wise, but you never know. They could pull off another trade. You never know. The NBA is a crazy day. My third team that I definitely think will be in the playoffs, and that is the Miami Heat. I think they're the biggest winners of this NBA offseason too. I love the move of getting Kyle Lowry in. He's a bit older. He's a bit on the older side, but as we know, we've seen Chris Paul, we've seen Mike Conley, older point guards still produce in this league and be, maybe a second, third option on a legit contending team. So I think it puts the Heat in that tier of Bucks, Nets, Heat, and that could be a hot take, but I really think that I really think the Heat are a really interesting team, and I think they're only going to get better, especially with Kyle Lowry being a person that will fit into their culture. That's what they're massive about in the NBA, and in Miami, they're massive about their culture. I think he's going to buy you in, and him and Jimmy are really good friends. They're close, so don't think that that's not a big thing, because it's really a big thing, because Jimmy, as we know, I really like Jimmy a lot. I think he's a very misguided player and a misguided person. He just wants to win and be competitive at all times, and I think Miami is the perfect spot for him, if not Miami, then San Antonio. But I really do think the Heat are going to be really good. I would say that they'd be really close to being, maybe, they upset the Bucks last year in the bubble. We all know the bubble was a bit different, but I wouldn't be shocked if they could, upset one of those teams. Like if someone said to me, Miami's going to upset the Bucks or the Nets, I wouldn't be shocked right now, because obviously they're the best two teams right now. But we're talking about the Heat, and yeah, they're obviously going to be in the playoff series. I reckon they'll be at least a top 4 seed. My fourth team that I think will be in the playoffs, Atlanta. Atlanta, for me, are a really interesting team because they're still super young. Like, a lot of people don't realize, I don't even know who their oldest player on their team would be. I think it might be Danilo Gallinari or Solomon Hill. And, if they're 30, 31, then you look at their team, you look at how young they are, the experience they gained this past postseason is going to be invaluable for them, because that was Trae Young's first ever playoff series, and he got him to the Eastern Conference Finals. So there's no chance that they're not going to make it. I think that they have the right coach in Nate McMillan there. I think he suits the personnel there. He got them to buy into playing defense, and their offense is always going to be good, especially when you have Trae Young there leading them in assists, scoring. He's really good at just being a basketball player. And what I mean by that is he can just play, and people can play with him. Kind of like CP3. I wouldn't say he's on that level of CP3, but he makes people on his team better than him. And Bill Simmons always said, I didn't know if he could be a leader or a winning team. I didn't know if the stats he's putting up were just empty stats. But and I love Bill Simmons a lot. I listen to him a lot, and he said that no, he was wrong. Trae Young's the real deal, and I think Trae Young could be, really looking to get maybe not an MVP year, but if Atlanta do really well this year and they rack up a lot of wins, I could see them maybe being a top 4 seed too. But as we know, it's hard to choose right now, because maybe teams might figure out Atlanta and what they do, but I still think that Atlanta are going to be really solid, really, really intrigued by them, and I do hope that Cam Reddish can maybe take a step up. If he can take a step up, it not just improves Atlanta, but it also improves, the draft stock. The trade value of him or DeAndre Hunter. You can pick, and then you can trade one of them for maybe another asset, maybe a backup center per se, or maybe something that's more of in a win now mode. Or you can just keep the assets going, and then at the end of the day, you choose, maybe you can do restricted free agency, sign and trade one of them, because I don't think they'll be able to keep all of these players, because as we saw, they had to pay John Collins and Max Steele. So that's going to be interesting for me. That's more interesting for me to where I would be more inclined to say, who will they keep? Will they keep Cam Reddish, who had a decent postseason, or will they keep DeAndre Hunter, a bit more of a consistent player that fits better with them? So that for me is a bit more interesting of whether they'll make the playoffs. But we'll move on. One of the teams I do believe that will make the playoffs, and it has been a long time since they've been in the playoffs, and that is the Chicago Bulls. Now, I'm not a super high on them being a playoff contender, because I believe that, Zach LaVine's a great player. Lonzo Ball, I still believe that he can be a really good player. He might not be an all-star caliber player, and that's okay, because there's only 24 people in the league each year that are all-stars. So it's hard to be an all-star. The hype he had coming in, it might have hindered him a bit, but I still think he's a good player. My biggest question is DeMar DeRozan, and I'm not saying that he's a bad player. I don't think he's over the hill at all, but I'm curious to see what he's going to be like on this team, because he's kind of been the first option in his whole career, really. In San Antonio, they played a bit more team-style basketball, but he was kind of their first option. Him or LaMarcus Aldridge back last year when they were playing together. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do there. Is Zach LaVine going to still be the first option, or is DeMar DeRozan going to be the second option? That's for me is an interesting take. You got Vucevic there, who's people still for some reason underrate him. He's a top 5 center in this league. He can score the ball at a high clip. I definitely think they will be a playoff team, and a playoff team, but they can be anywhere from 5th to 10th, or 5th to 8th. I think they'll be in the 8th, but I think anywhere from like 5th or 4th to 8th, because they're still lacking a bit of depth. I would like to see them, go out and get some players that can help them. Maybe look at a Paul Millsap, if you have enough cap space, or he's going to take a vet minimum or a mid-level exception. He might be a decent piece for them, but, I'm not too sure right now, because you got to put a lot of pressure on Pat Williams being a 4, and I think Pat Williams is very much like Kawhi, like he's a wing 2-way player, and I think he's a real asset and a commodity, and I reckon he can turn out being a really good player in this league. So it's interesting to see what they're doing. But if you're a Chicago fan, like my mate Mossy is, you're happy that there's a bit of hope, and there's at least expectations on them making the playoffs. And it's always better when Chicago's doing well in the league. It's always better. So we're going to move on now, and this is where it gets a bit tricky for me, because we've already got the Bucks, Nets, Heat. We've got Atlanta, and we've got Chicago in there. I still think if Philadelphia still have this team that they do now, they're still going to be in it. So if they don't trade Ben Simmons, they'll still be in the playoff contending team. Last year they were the first seed. Don't forget that they were a really good team. If Joel Embiid doesn't get injured, maybe Joel Embiid's an MVP. If they get past the second round, maybe match up really well against the Bucks. Does Ben Simmons do a good job on, you would say, Giannis, but we do say a lot of what ifs, and for me, the biggest what if with Philadelphia right now is Ben Simmons going to get traded? Now, there is rumors that Damian Lillard, they're looking to target him and acquire him, and knowing Daryl Morey, I would say he would throw any asset they have to get him, but Joel Embiid and Tobias Harris. So for me, if you're Portland, try to squeeze everything you can out of Philadelphia. So for me, I would take Ben Simmons and I would try to mold him. I think he would fit with Chauncey Billups, because Chauncey's a clutch guy too, and that's such an invaluable thing. Like, Ben Simmons likes being with clutch people. Now, we've seen Ben Simmons come out and say he only wants to play for either the Lakers, Clippers, or Warriors. I don't think he can play. There's no chance he can play for the Lakers, because they can't fit him in the cap unless something happens with them and they flip Westbrook for him. But I still don't think that would be an option. The Clippers have just recently today acquired Eric Bledsoe for Pat Beverly and Rajon Rondo, and that's a good trade, I think, for the Grizzlies. It doesn't matter, because I think the most consistent piece is you got a backup point guard in Pat Beverly. You don't know what they're going to do with Rajon Rondo. I think he could get bought out, or he could get traded again. But at least you got Pat Beverly, who can be a real defensive lockdown. You can play both of them at the same time, and then Pat can go guard the best player possible. And I think he really suits the Grizzlies, the grit and grind. Like, he'll be a really valuable piece for them. So that trade happened there. But Ben Simmons, going back to him, if you're Portland, I would take a punt on him. You don't really have any other option to get stars. Like, no one's coming to play for Portland, and that's evident. We've seen it. Carmelo's been the only player that's come to play for Portland. They've usually acquired all their players through trade and draft, and I do appreciate teams like that do that, but they're not going to go out and get a talent. So if you can get an all-star caliber talent back for Dame Lillard, if you do end up trading him, get him. I would try to get you. You're looking to get Matisse Thybulle, you're looking to get Tyrese Maxey, and probably a pick, and that's a lot for Damian Lillard, but I think that would be, Philadelphia, if they say, we'll give you this, and Portland agree, you pull the trigger on that trade 10 times out of 10, because the fit there would be Dame Lillard and Joel Embiid. Now we're looking at Philadelphia being not only a top 4 seed, but I personally think Dame and Joel Embiid, that would be a really good fit, and that could even contend against the Nets and the Bucks. And that's only based on the fact if they still have good players that they can get through trade and stuff. Because if they give up Matisse, they give up Tyrese, they give up Ben Simmons, and that's 3 players that are in their rotation at all times. And for me, if I'm Philadelphia this year, I'd probably start Matisse Thybulle. I do Ben Simmons, Matisse, as it stands so far. Ben Simmons, Matisse, Tobias. You've got Joel Embiid, and then you've got possibly their 4-man was Tobias, so you could even start Danny Green there. So for me, that would be my 5 for them. At the moment, I don't believe I'm forgetting anybody off Philadelphia at the moment. I'm just going to double check right now. But yeah, that would be my starting 5. Looking at Matisse playing in the playoffs, or not in the playoffs, playing in the Olympics, I thought that he was Australia's most underutilized piece. And it's obvious because, Australia had really good chemistry with their players, but he was really, really good for them. And I really liked watching him play. He plays the right way, doesn't need the ball in his hands at any time. So for me, I really like Matisse Thybulle, and I think, you kind of got to do something a bit different there, because they're kind of stuck in a rut. They also do have Steph Curry, who they might start, but even if you start Matisse and then you bring Danny Green off the bench and start Steph Curry, because Steph Curry does fit really well with Ben Simmons and he's a great shooter, or even if you bring Steph Curry off the bench and just go out and try to be a 6-man candidate of the year, even that could be a possibility. But yeah, I still think Philadelphia will definitely be in this playoff series. But if the rumblings do get a bit bigger, in the sense where Portland, Ben Simmons for Dame, I would throw anything that I can at Dame to get. If I would throw anything I can at Dame to get rid of Ben Simmons, because we just know that he just doesn't fit with Joel Embiid. But if their team's still like that is, they're definitely going to make the playoffs. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. So for me, I have the Hornets, the Celtics, I have the Washington Wizards, and I have the Knicks, all vying for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for 2 spots. Now, I'm actually really high on Charlotte. I really think that they're going to be a competitive team. And before LaMelo injured his wrist last year, they were the 4th seed in the East. And I think people are forgetting that. Like, they made the play-in tournament. If LaMelo didn't get injured, they might as well have been maybe a 4th, 5th seed. So for me, I really do believe that they can make that jump. If I was to say 2 teams right now that I would, be confident in putting in those last 2 spots, I'd be confident in putting the Boston Celtics in there. I do think that duo of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum is just better than any other duo any other team has on here. And I think they got a bit more talent than most teams. I think one player for them that's going to take a really big step up, or at least he should be taking a big step up, is Robert Williams. That guy's a really good player. He's kind of like Tyson Chandler a bit for me. He's a good rebounder. He's a great defender. He shoots the ball at a really high clip. So for me, I'd be looking at him getting a lot of minutes now, especially when you look at it, they don't really have any clear-cut center. They traded away Tristan Thompson to the Sacramento Kings, and he's, whatever. And that's like the one team you would never want to get traded to is Sacramento. Like, they are like, I don't even know what they're like. They're outstandingly average. But yeah, the Celtics would be one for me. I want to say the Knicks in that last 8 seed. I really do. But Indiana are a tough team. They're a really good team. And let's not forget that they have, maybe a top 10, top 5 coach in this league in Rick Carlisle. I think that's a really big addition for them. That was their biggest addition before they went out and signed anyone. You look at it, I would say the best coach in the East is Eric Spoelstra. And then it could very well possibly be Rick Carlisle. Because we saw last year, he nearly got the Mavericks over the Clippers with just Luka Doncic really being their star player. So yeah, I do think that Rick Carlisle is their big addition. But then you look at it, you have Washington, and Washington can kind of be what Indiana were 3 years ago when they traded for Domantas Sabonis. And who else did they trade? And Victor Oladipo. I think they can be that team where they didn't really have a clear-cut star at that time, but they all built a really good culture. They bought in, they played really hard, really fast. And it doesn't shock me that Nate McMillan was their coach, because you just see what he's done with Atlanta now. He's done a really good job with them now. And one of the big thing it's a side topic here, but one of the big thing Nate preaches in his team is belief. You got to have that belief, not just within yourself, but within your group. And that's something that I love using when I coach. Like, you got to believe, boys, because if we believe, that's one hurdle that we can control already. Because a lot of the things we do, in sport, it's self-belief and it's manifesting that. If you manifest something and you think it's going to happen, it can happen, and you got to believe it and you got to self-belief. It's kind of a confidence thing. Don't want to be cocky, but you want to be confident, and you want to be confident in yourself because you put all that work in. But that's just like, that's a side topic, but I really wanted to say that about Nate McMillan. That's why I really think he's a good coach. But yeah, no, I think Washington has those vibes of what Indiana did a couple of years ago. But if I had to put the 8th team in there, it's between Indy, the Knicks, and the Hornets. I want to say the Hornets. I also want to say the Knicks because I love seeing the Knicks be good again. But I would do, as the 8th team right now, I would say the New York Knicks, just based on the fact that they've got a bit of chemistry together. I think if Kemba Walker is healthy, that's a really big thing for me. Like, if he's healthy, I think they'll be really good. And Evan Fournier is a really good pickup. He's a bit expensive, but like I really rate him as a pickup. Like, as we saw last year, the Knicks had a great defense, a great defensive system. They had a great culture, but they didn't really have anyone, apart from Julius Randle. And Julius Randle kind of got, figured out against Atlanta. Atlanta did a really good job in shutting him down. They didn't really have a person that can just go out and get you a bucket. Like, Derrick Rose could at times, but he wasn't like a clear, like, premier player to go get a bucket. And I think Kemba Walker can do that. You can give him the ball sometimes and just say, all right, give it isolation or just a middle pick and roll and just create out of that. He can definitely do that. So I would kind of tend to lean more on the Knicks being that 8th seed. And if any team I would say would be in it, it's hard because Indiana and Charlotte can really honestly be there. And it's really interesting to see what it can be. I'm really interested to see in this East pool, because the way I look at it, I think it's just as stacked as the West. Like, we've literally got 10 teams in the East that I think 11 teams that I would say they have a realistic shot at making the playoffs. And then I would say in the West, I would say there's probably 11 to 12 teams that would have a shot at making the playoffs. And I'm going to do another podcast that's going to come out in a couple of days on my West predictions. But the only teams from the West that will not make the playoffs this year will be the Thunder. They definitely won't make it. I don't think that the Pelicans would make it, even with their hours constructed now. But they would be, close to that sniff of the 10th seed. Definitely not the Houston Rockets this year. But they'll be an exciting team, and at least they've got, some sort of potential and some sort of vision. But for me, guys, that's the 8 teams I would pick, and then it's only by a hair to Knicks right now. I wouldn't be shocked. My 9th team would be Indiana and then 10th Hornets. But that's just based on the fact that I do really think that Rick Carlisle is a really good coach and he can get the most out of his players, and we've seen that, time and time again. So for me, guys, that's the East top 8 right now I have right now. If you guys think any different, please let me know in the comment section below on Instagram or on anywhere you're listening to this podcast service. I appreciate you guys listening. Thank you for listening. Take care. Have a great day. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Lanes Podcast. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe all of the content. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at Lanes Podcast. Link will be below in the description. But most importantly, guys, have a great day. Thanks for listening.